Everything that happens to you, from bad weather to an ingrown toenail, is an opportunity for you to be like Jesus. Don't miss the opportunity. Have a blessed weekend. And this weekend, be a rainbow in someone else's cloud. God bless.
Salt and Light Radio, AM 1140 KGEM Boise, FM 102.3 K272 FS Boise, AM 1270 KTFI Twin Falls, and FM 101.7 K269HA Twin Falls.
It's an exciting morning show on Salt and Light Radio. It's time to start your day the Catholic way. Morning Light is 1 hour of live local information and interviews, along with news, traffic, weather, and sports from the Treasure and Magic Valleys. The Salt and Light Catholic Radio Network now presents Morning Light with your hosts Brian Howell and Hope Ryan.
Good morning, broadcasting live from the St. Gabriel studio on the Boise Bench. It is a Faithful Friday edition of Morning Light, heard across the Salt and Light Catholic Radio Network.
And it's Friday.
It is.
Yay!
September 16th. Who do we got coming up today?
Well, today, which I'm going to deem Peach Canning Eve, we have Mark Rennick. He's going to give us an update from the Society of St. Vincent de Paul Reentry Program. We will talk with Maureen O'Toole, filling in today for Rebecca M. Carroll, who is the coaching educator, and another edition of Priscilla's Porch with Busy Shore.
Please pray for our priests, specifically today, Father Roger Fernando at Sacred Heart Parish here in Boise. And this week we've been praying for the Carmelite sisters up in Sandpoint. Today is the feast of St. Cornelius. He was elected pope back in the 3rd century. Apparently there was no pope for like 14 months.
Unpopeness.
Well, because of the martyrdom of St. Fabian, apparently probably nobody wanted the job after that. But St. Cornelius filled that slot. We'll learn all about that story a little bit later on. But
the
today,
incredible courage
of
those first centuries. We have no idea.
No.
Incredible, incredible courage.
Today we get to finish the litany, the Irish litany to Mary.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Destroy our wickedness and depravity. Raise the fallen, the debilitated, and the fettered. Loose the condemned. Repair through thyself the transgressions of our immorality and our vices. Bestow upon us through thyself the blossoms and ornaments of good actions and virtues. Appease us for the judge by thy prayers and thy supplication. Allow us not, for mercy's sake, to be carried off from thee among the spoils of our enemies. Allow not our souls to be condemned, but take us to thyself, forever under thy protection. We, moreover, beseech and pray thee, Holy Mary, to obtain through thy potent supplication before thy only Son, that is Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God, that God may defend us from all straits and temptations. Obtain also for us, from the God of creation, the forgiveness and remission of all our sins and trespasses, that we may receive from him further, through thy intercession, the everlasting habitation of the heavenly kingdom, through all eternity, in the presence of the saints and the saintly virgins of the world, which may we deserve, may we enjoy forever and ever.
Amen.
In the name of the Father, and the Son,
and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Morning Light News Time 7:03, 57 degrees in Boise, 51 in Twin Falls. A 28-year-old Melba man died after a single vehicle rollover near Celebration Park Tuesday around 7 p.m. The man was driving westbound on Warren Spur Road when he failed to negotiate a curve and drove off the right shoulder. According to Idaho State Police, he was not wearing a seatbelt and died at the scene. The man has not been identified. Pending notification of his next of kin, ISP continues to investigate.
Two injured first responders are making slow but sure recoveries. At Buell, firefighter Jared Nebecker is still in the surgical ICU in Utah after an amputation. Idaho State Trooper Sergeant Mike Wendler is recovering after being struck by a car on I-84 in Jerome. Wendler is also recovering slowly, but he's able to communicate with his family.
Increasing threats have caused Boise City Hall to beef up security. The city plans to heighten garage door security at City Hall with new doors that would keep people from gaining access to the basement levels without authorization. City Council approved a request to reallocate $550,000 for the security project at a Tuesday work session. $400,000 of that would be taken out of the Public Works Department budget.
According to IDEdnews.org, more rural school districts are considering a 4-day week, specifically because hiring teachers has been so difficult. Some job postings go unfulfilled into the school year or even for several years. Currently, just under half of school districts in Idaho are opting for the 4-day week. This creates the curious situation of pressuring larger districts to adopt similar measures so teachers don't head off to schools that have an extra day off. Traffic, weather, and air quality are next.
Salt and Light Radio thanks Snake River Pool and Spa for their financial support as a Beacon of Light member. They also support Sacred Heart Ranch of Idaho, providing housing, support, and unconditional love to young women during life's difficult transitions. The website is sacredheartranch.org to learn more about this powerful ministry. And let Snake River Pool and Spa make it easy to take it easy with your family. Located in Boise, Twin Falls, and Meridian, or online at thespateam.com.
Good morning, light traffic. There is major road work on Orchard and Fairview. My map doesn't say that, but I passed it along the way. Like the road is dug up and piled off to this side. So if that's part of your commute, just keep that in mind. You won't be able to continue eastbound there on Fairview. The freeway commute this morning is quite lovely. I'm not sure who is staying home, but we thank you because it is making the commute very nice. Euston and Cloverdale, they're still working on that intersection there, and also downtown. There's still utility work on 16th and Main. That's your morning light traffic.
Treasure Valley weekend weather, mostly sunny, highs 75 to 80, overnight lows in the mid-50s. Magic Valley, expect partly cloudy skies this weekend with highs in the mid-70s and overnight lows around 50 degrees. Sunrise this morning will be at 7:25 and tonight's sunset 7:52. Right now it is 52 degrees in Caldwell at Our Lady of the Valley, 50 in Buell at Immaculate Conception, Rupert reporting 48 degrees at St. Nicholas Parish.
Idaho Department of Environmental Quality real-time air monitoring. I have good news for you. You can breathe everywhere in the state. It's still moderate through most of the the western part of the state, like Panhandle all the way down to Nevada. But really, compared to how it's been over the last week, this is really good news, and it's just going to continue to get better, knock on wood. We're going to be right back with Mark Rennick from the Society of St. Vincent de Paul.
Salt and Light is 100% listener-supported Catholic radio for Southern Idaho. The Fall Pledge Drive begins Wednesday, October 12th, and our theme is taken from 2 Chronicles, Stand Firm. Enjoy 3 days of inspirational stories from people in your parish, sharing how God has helped them through adversity. During that time, Salt and Light Radio will be asking for your financial pledge. To learn how you can help this radio ministry, please visit saltandlightradio.com or call 208-344-4774. And thank you for your support.
Support for Salt and Light Radio comes from Beacon of Light sponsor Dr. Victor Sanchez at Altruistic Chiropractic. With over 35 years of experience and training, he's dedicated to improving overall health by relieving back or neck pain, headaches, muscle tension, and more. Altruistic Chiropractic is now in a new location, 10 Mile and McMillan in Meridian. The phone number is 208-938-5585. 208-938-5585. And the website is altruisticchiro.com.
Do you still need to make your will or update it? Whether you're 18 or 80, everyone needs a will. The diocese has made it easy and free. Visit their secure online will-making platform at givingdocs.com/Catholic Idaho. You can complete your free legally binding will in about 20 minutes. Making a will is the best way to protect your loved ones and to contribute to the people and causes you love the most. Get started today at givingdocs.com/Catholic Idaho.
Good morning, 7:08. Morning Light continues on this faithful Friday, heard across the Salt and Light Catholic Radio Network. Thanks for joining us. Joined in the St. Gabriel studio by Mark Rennick from St. Vincent de Paul's Reentry Program. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning.
Good
Kind
morning.
of got the B team in here today. You've got all the other executives weren't there, and so I get this call yesterday afternoon. Hey, what are you doing tomorrow morning? So
There you go.
no, I like coming and seeing you guys. So
I
I'm
appreciate
so
it.
if I had it my way, I'd be here all the time.
Can we plug his show? Because I know I see it
Yeah,
kind
sure.
of file through on Facebook. You
Do you?
have your own radio program
I
as
do.
well.
It's on,
Tell
let's
people
say,
about that.
another Christian radio station. Let's say. Yeah, it's called Victory Over Sin, and what we try to do is to address issues that affect people coming out of incarceration. And I like to say it's a good body of work because we keep all the archives. We've had governors and state senators and offenders, people who help people coming out of incarceration. It's a heck of a lot of fun. I got that bug almost 5 years ago with somebody that Brian and I know, and it's exciting. I really like doing it. I was afraid of it, of
Yeah.
course, obviously, but I got into it, and I really like it. It's fun to do. So it's a 30-minute show, and it's on Saturdays on KBXO.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's
Excellent.
fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the plug, Hope. I
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah, well,
expecting that.
You,
That's
you,
great.
You just deserve that because the
Thank you.
story cannot be told enough.
Well, I
and we
think-
only get to talk to you very periodically. So
Yeah.
if people are really interested or curious,
And people
they should
who
know where to plug in.
who aren't talk radio hosts don't really appreciate the work that goes into producing just 1 hour of radio. There's a lot of behind the
it's
scenes.
a lot of work. You're right. And I think, but for me, I mean, I'm blessed to do what I do, and we'll talk about that in a minute, I'm sure. But overall, where my heart is really making life better for people coming out of incarceration. And I think I do that by having people, encourage them to tell their story, because that's the only way, at least in Idaho, I believe that those issues are going to change here.
Mhm.
It's because somebody like myself who's been incarcerated needs to tell that story so that somebody can say, really, that's hard to believe.
Yeah.
You mean ramens cost 85 cents inside, and it costs how much to make a phone? Whatever the issue is.
Wow.
So
Or
those
so
are
many people never, they've never touched someone who's been incarcerated that
Absolutely.
they knew of.
Yep.
And they're like, oh, are you real? It was like the first time I encountered someone who had never met a Catholic. He
Yeah.
sort of poked me and they're like, gosh, you guys are real?
Yeah.
And I thought, where have you been?
right.
But when you're surrounded by it, what is normal and what is not, and the stories need to be shared.
That's I get that same thing. They go, you work with Catholics? Well, yeah, I work with Catholics. They really support people who come out of incarceration. It's okay. It's kind of a whole collective. Anybody that does that, I'd kind
So-
of hang around with.
So Deacon Mark Garrity was our guest to wrap up yesterday's show, and he talked about the diocesan efforts in the prison ministry arena and mentioned this project called Alpha,
Right.
and had
That's what-
mentioned you by name.
Yeah, I was excited to. I was going to bring that in, thinking that was a big deal, and I didn't know he was here yesterday.
No, he just warmed it
Just
up.
sort
for
of
you.
scratched the
Yeah,
surface.
yeah. So
No, I
let's
think
unpack it.
it's really an interesting project, and I've been a Vincentian for probably 8.5 years or so now, and it's always been my issue, I think, because I'm not Catholic. Why doesn't St. Vincent de Paul work closer with the diocese, kind of? And so when Mark came to us with this project, it was like everything, okay. And what it is, it's kind of like almost simply to put Christianity 101 so that it's non-denominational, and there are videos and there are discussions groups to where the volunteers will have a high percentage of interaction with people who take the class. The class is free, and we're actually giving them lunch. It begins on the 24th of this month at in a conference room where St. Vincent de Paul's headquarters are on Fairview, and that's 5256 Fairview. And I want to say it's 12:30 to 2:30.
Okay.
So these are for folks that are out, not for folks that are in.
I'm going to say anybody that's just out of incarceration that wants to come on a Saturday and get a free lunch and learn a little bit about something that they're probably afraid of in terms of their facing their own spirituality or who they are or this being called God that they think they should connect with. And so it's that kind of laid back format, and that's one of the reasons why I think this will work. So yeah, I'm excited about it.
I was taken by something that Deacon had said about how we as Christians, we take for granted that everybody knows about Jesus.
Yeah, that's-
And he made the point that Jesus Christ, Abraham Lincoln, King Tut, they're just historical figures to some people. And that's where Alpha comes in. that we
What a
teach
great
you
point.
that, yes, he was a historical figure, obviously, but much more than that.
And I would argue too also that most of us who have had, let's say, issues in our lives, and I'm going to include myself in that, when you're afraid of something that you can't define, then you tend to put it off. And a lot of us, like myself included, masked that fear. And so we just, use substances to say, I don't even want to think about that.
Right.
So let's numb that and use drugs or drink or do whatever to put off, if you will, that discussion. And I think this is a way where we see so much of a population coming out that, at least they come into my office, so they've been incarcerated. They really need to address the aspect that they made a pretty big mistake. Let's figure out why that is. And they probably don't have that connection for the most part, or they say they do, but they don't. And so this is a way for them to do that, because I think all of us in the room believe that the only way we're going to find that peace of heart and that happiness in our heart is if we develop that relationship. And so I can say that to as much as I can, but I can't convince you of that until you're ready to do that. I mean, I always use the example of my kids. I've got 2 kids, and both of them hadn't figured it out. One has finally really got it and figured it out, and yet I still struggle with my oldest, but I can't just say, I would love for you to do this, 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 and this, but
Right.
she's not going to do that. But you just hang around until you be that example and say, yeah, Dad's this goofy Christian guy. It's like, that's what he is. And I hang around him, but I don't understand him.
Right.
So
some conversation in her head, she'd be like, Dad, that's what Dad says.
That's right.
And now my friend is saying that, or someone that I trust or I love,
Yeah.
and those seeds are
Well, I
going to
know
grow.
it's like, I don't know about you, but it's like the older I get, the more I think my dad, who died 30 some years ago, it's like, oh man, that's what you said. And I didn't listen to that, and I didn't believe that, and I didn't think that was valid. But
That's funny.
God,
My husband will
you're-
do that. He'll be like, "Thanks, Dad."
Yeah, thanks.
I'll be like, "Sorry."
Well,
It came up out of nowhere.
I find it too. When my daughter acts out, I think my dad's in heaven going, yeah, Mark, do you remember what you were like? I love watching this, man. This is great.
So is this for men and women?
It's for men and women. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. So anyone in particular who should be invited?
I hate to just restrict it to people who are coming out of incarceration, but anybody that wants to show up, I'm sure they're going to let you in. And it's on the 24th. It should be a good group. Like I said, I think for me, I'm excited that we get to do something with the diocese to set an example for working together in the future. And I've always liked Mark, and we always talk about it over the years, but this is the first thing he's come through. And there are other organizations in the Valley. I'll give some credit to Chrysler's Transitional Housing for Women, which is a real strong Christian program. They put their ladies through that the first 30 days that they're in the house. So that's got everybody likes it. So we'll see what happens.
Another stat that he had thrown out in yesterday's interview, and in case you missed it, you can go back to saltandlightradio.com, click the Morning Light page, and hit podcast if you missed yesterday's interview with Deacon Mark Garrity. But he'd said, I think it was 85% of the people incarcerated will be coming out.
Yeah, I would say higher than that. I've heard directors say 97%.
Wow.
So everybody gets out pretty much.
And I think we that are not incarcerated, we need to be prepared to welcome these people after they're rehabilitated back into society and help in any way that we possibly can.
Yeah, we do very little to support the fact that they're going to be back in our community and they're going to be our neighbors. And I think the quicker we face that reality, the easier it will be for the people coming back in and for us,
But there seems to be this long list of almost insurmountable odds that they have to overcome in like the first 30, 45, 60 days.
And the cultural stigma. I remember, so here's a little blast from the past from Hope. So I was working at this restaurant in Spokane because I was going to college. And there was this kid that I had befriended, same age, who had spent some time in jail. And I just assumed that he did something particularly awful. And so finally I had coughed up the courage to ask him. I'm like, well, why were you in? And he was like, oh, I had drugs. And I was so relieved, right, to find out that it was just a drug issue, I am air quoting. But just my own ignorance at that moment of not realizing that they're people too, and they make mistakes. And think of all the mistakes we have made that could have really gone differently in our lives.
Yes, that's kind of back to what I was talking about too. If people telling their story, if more people would come out of an incarceration with a strong relationship with God and understand who they are and be willing to admit where they were, then that would really desensitize that to you or to anyone. You just kind of admit it. I always say this, and I think I've said it here, you know, the barista that pours my coffee knows I'm a Christian, knows I've been in prison, and knows I work with people coming out of incarceration. And it normalizes the situation. It's like, oh, that guy driving the Camry, you know, he's been in prison. And so, yeah, everybody, you don't know who's driving through that hasn't been in prison. So it's what we all need to do.
Right.
Yeah, so I love it. In fact, depending on how much time you got, there's been a really interesting development within the Department of Corrections in that for years they've had a contract with a nonprofit called Three Oaks where they employed volunteer religious coordinators. It was an inexpensive way to address the needs of the population, and they've ended that contract. So I'm speaking now to the people who have been volunteers in the past and going into the prison. If that's something you want to do, there are now positions available part-time through the Department of Corrections where they're hiring people to be not a volunteer religious coordinator, but a religious coordinator, where you can actually facilitate those religious services inside the prison. So if that's something you've always wanted to do, you should go to the Idaho Department of Corrections website. The pay starts at $26 an hour.
Wow.
So it is a part-time job, but that's a real opening for people, and it's a real opportunity for somebody that might want to get involved in doing that. And if any of the things in terms of Alpha or in terms of those jobs, if you want to get in touch with me, I'll be happy to help you with all that. And if you go to St. Vincent de Paul's website here locally, you'll eventually find pictures of me or a way to contact me. You can contact me and we'll be happy to help you.
Okay.
So that's kind of interesting. It's kind of like one of these things that are playing out that was a little bit of politics for the Department of Corrections, and so we'll see what happens.
So how can our listeners help the reentry program? Are there volunteer opportunities, monetary help? What do you guys need from us?
Well, there are always volunteer opportunities, and I certainly we would always welcome any kind of monetary if that's something that you're interested in. But I think more importantly, keeping with the theme of what we're talking about, let's say somebody's listening to me and they really have a little bit of a heart, or they think they do. Contact me and come by the office, where I'm based mostly on the Overland office at 3217 Overland. Reach out to me and come out, and if you've got the time, do a pickup with me.
Mm-hmm.
Do a pickup. Like, for instance, it's tomorrow morning I will pick somebody up at 7 a.m., a lady from South Boise, and take her to the bus station. And that's one of the services that we provide for people who don't have anyone when they get out. Come with me and ride out there in the beautiful morning, and I watch the sun come up. Let's pick up somebody who's absolutely, totally frightened about leaving incarceration. Let's take them to the bus and inevitably they'll say, "Thank you for doing this. Why do you do this?"
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you get a chance to say, "Well, I would say because I've been where you've been." And it's not a correctional officer, it's not a case manager dropping them off at a bus station saying, "I don't want to see you again." I think. But we're able to say, this is what we do because this is what we believe. You're able to kind of display your own Christianity and share that with somebody. And that plants a seed for somebody going wherever. And you'll be surprised how many of those things come back to you over time. It's just time and time again, I'll see situations where somebody will walk into my office and say, "You picked me up twice," or "You picked me up 3 times. And, it does plant a seed hopefully for change, so that they do what we're talking about. It seems like the theme here is changing your heart. So that's what we do. And it's a powerful way for you to live out your Christianity. Come and just see it. I mean, it'll open your eyes about the system. And maybe you want to help me pick up people. That'd be great. Fantastic.
That sounds amazing. And
Yeah,
then you can
it's
say to
fun.
them, "I really hope I see you again."
Yeah,
You'd be the
really.
one person who's like, "Yes,
Yeah.
you're welcome here. We want you
Well,
to be
that's
here."
the idea of what we do, and let's give some kudos to Ralph May, who lets me do this, is that he lets me run free reign with the program that is totally expanding and growing. We've got some exciting new stuff education-wise. We've hired a man that retired from the Department of Corrections to run the educational programs, and we are doing gangbusters. We've got an office in Canyon now, got an office here, and that St. Vincent de Paul has expanded over to the corporate offices over on Fairview. So we've done real well, but it's under the leadership of Ralph May, who's let us do that.
So speaking of Ralph, you posted a picture on Facebook. of Ralph power washing
Yes.
a building.
Yes.
Could we just blow
Ralph
some
is-
sunshine toward Ralph?
I do that a lot, but people should do it more. I mean, he works so hard, and he's always there. I mean, he's a younger guy than me, so I can't do all the stuff he does, but he loves doing that kind of stuff. Like, we bought this big old dump truck, and he was insistent on having a brother-in-law kind of make it all work in Gooding, and he went over and worked on it for a couple of days. He's always there, and he's always doing those types of things, and he always kicks in. It's like, the great thing about my job is that he's so busy during the week that he and I just see each other every Saturday at 10 because I never see him. I mean, he's busy and I'm busy, so we meet at 10 on Saturdays because that's the time where nobody's going to walk into his office and take his time, and it's in the office over there and nobody's there on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
So he and I just get to sit on Saturdays. And it's I get to bounce off what I'm running through, and he gets to do it. It's the same kind of thing. So I really am fortunate to work for a guy that lets me do that. And to be honest with you, people who are incarcerated are lucky because he has led this support of allowing us to grow and to become larger and larger and larger. So, yeah.
Wow.
Awesome.
Always
That is
great to
good.
have you here.
I have to,
Thank you
have
so
to
much.
tell him to come back and listen to this because I said good things.
Maybe we'll send him a
I
clip.
should ask for a raise.
Must
There
be
you
that
go.
time of year when the evaluations are due, and so we
Yeah,
want to.
this is the thing that the consultants will like this, but I've worked for Ralph for 5 years. His weakness is evaluations, and I've never had an evaluation. Never had an evaluation.
It sounds like
he's
you get
asked
to
me to
do
write
it
it
every
up.
Saturday.
He's asked me to write it up several
Yeah.
times because he has to do that, but he's never done it. So I don't know. We'll see.
It's funny.
I'll probably get fired when I do.
I doubt.
Mark Rennick from the Reentry Program, Society of St. Vincent de Paul, Southwest Idaho. We'll take a short break here and be back with the Coaching Educator as Morning Light continues next.
Daily Meditations of Pope Benedict XVI, presented by Leonardo D. Philippus of St. Luke Productions.
The sign of the cross. The most basic Christian gesture in prayer is and always will be the sign of the cross. It is a way of confessing Christ crucified with one's very body. To seal oneself with the sign of the cross is a visible and public yes to him who suffered for us. To him who in the body has made God's love visible even to the utmost. To the God who reigns not by destruction, but by the humility of suffering and love, which is stronger than all the power of the world and wiser than all the calculating intelligence of men. The sign of the cross is a confession of faith. I believe in him who suffered for me and rose again. I believe in him who in his weakness is the Almighty, in him who can and will save me even in apparent absence and impotence. By signing ourselves with the cross, we place ourselves under the protection of the cross, hold it in front of us like a shield that will guard us in all the distress of daily life and give us the courage to go on. The cross shows us the road of life, the imitation of Christ. Whenever we make the sign of the cross, we accept our baptism anew. Christ from the cross draws us, so to speak, to himself. We make the sign of the cross on ourselves and thus enter the power of the blessing of Jesus Christ. We make the sign over people to whom we wish a blessing. Through the cross, we can become sources of blessing for one another.
This meditation is taken from Benedictus, published by Ignatius Press and Magnificat, and produced by St. Luke Productions. Learn more at stlukeproductions.com.
.728, Morning Light continues across the Salt and Light Catholic Radio Network. It's a Faithful Friday edition. Expecting Maureen O'Toole here today, filling in for Rebecca. Rebecca's got her hands full with family stuff.
It happens.
Yeah. Families are
Without a
messy, as we all know.
Right. We do a lot of commiserating
Yeah.
off the air.
That's right. You know, that's the bonus material when you buy the Blu-ray edition of the show. You get all those behind-the-scenes discussions.
All the details about our families
Yeah.
that nobody else
The
wants.
stuff that we talk about when Leonardo's teaching you about church stuff.
Right, right.
We solve the world's problems.
Yeah,
behind the
I mean,
scenes.
Brian is vintage at parenting teenagers. I'm new. We're both married.
Yeah.
And Trinity's
so-
taking notes. Don't do this.
Don't do this, Trinity.
That.
Yes, whatever you do.
This.
Maureen was going to bring Tim in. Tim is the head of the new apprenticeship programs here in the Treasure Valley, talking about apprenticeships, which is something that both of our kiddos, I think, have taken and expressed interest in. To do something like that. So even though
just
Serenity
to get a
is
hands-on experience.
She 15 now?
15.
So what sorts of things is she? I mean, right now the world's her oyster.
She's been pondering law enforcement, which kind of blew my mind. If for those of you who know Serenity, I'm sure it blows your mind too. Like, really? But we've been listening to the BPD Beat podcast. So the Boise Police Department has a podcast, and it's really interesting. All the jobs that are within, because you just think of like the patrol officer,
right?
But there are so many other fingers in the pie within law enforcement. A lot, people in the crime lab, people who work just with canines, people who do work with specific people, say domestic violence or kids or seniors, people who do neighborhood advancement. Oh, that's right. We can't miss getting the song in.
It's just a little Dragnet theme there. So, I thought, what the heck? We're going to talk about police stuff.
Nice.
We'll have a little police music in the background.
Yes, we love it. Yeah. Yeah. So there's that. But she's really open to a lot of things. She has a lot of curiosity. And at 15, you should.
Yeah.
You should be wondering about a lot of stuff. We're in a co-op. And there was a class about this kind of thing. And it was yesterday. And they had someone who flies planes for missionaries who go to obscure places.
Wow.
Yeah, I thought, well, that's different.
Interesting.
Anyway, they had it's a Protestant group, so there were several who talked about missionary things and how the different kind of traveling opportunities with missionaries. But the idea that this guy had a pilot's license and his sole task was to deposit missionaries and workers and supplies and just a lot of things in these remote spots, and to realize just the vastness of careers is so interesting because we encounter it now. Like when my husband got into bees, right? There's this whole underground bee community of people who speak bees and beehives and bee equipment and all of that stuff, which just blows my mind. But you find little niches, like there are adult Pokemon communities. There are Dungeons and Dragons has its own underground. Yeah. People who have just this setup in their basement. So there's just the depth and the breadth of it all kind of blows my mind. So she's just curious about a lot of things because as homeschooling parents, we hang around with other homeschooling parents. So her exposure to the breadth of jobs is relatively limited. But we know that, and we're like, oh, well, why don't you kind of dabble here and dabble there and ask them what they do and what does their dad do or mom do? And so that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Some advice that I got from a station manager a long time ago, and it's what I've passed on all 4 of my children, is find something that you love doing and then figure out a way to make money at it. And you'll never work a day in your life. Now, granted, I haven't made as much money as maybe some of my counterparts from high school and college, but I've really never worked a day in my life.
Right. Money isn't everything.
Yeah, because I just get so much enjoyment. And then, of course, the last 10 plus years here at Salt and Light Radio, before all my, the years I spent in commercial radio, this has been so much more of a blessing because now I get the faith life and the career path that God has chosen for me, I believe.
Right.
And now it all makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like, this is why you're here. And back then, there was sort of an apprenticeship program where you'd start off on the weekend, you'd have your mentors, you'd have the afternoon drive guy or the morning show guy sort of take you under his or her wing and show you the ropes. And I learned a lot. The 1 year that I was in Bozeman, I probably had learned more than I had learned the previous 3 years back home. But to have somebody take that interest in you and walk you on that path, that career path, and show you the ropes it's incredibly helpful.
Right. Well, and it's
valuable.
amazing you've been in the same career all that time.
Right.
Most people are bouncing careers. I mean, this is if I consider this a career, this is my 6th career or whatever. I came out of school and I taught in Catholic schools for a while. I bounced around doing that, realized that's not what I want to do forever. what I do when I grow up. Then I went into payroll accounting, did some number crunching for a while. That was kind of interesting. I worked for, since Mark was here, I worked for the Society of St. Vincent de Paul for 5 years. I started doing their books, so payroll accounting got me in. And then I did their community relations and stuff. That was when Grant, remember Grant Breidenbach brought in this article I wrote for the Statesman like 17 years ago.
Wow.
I was able to do Leadership Boise through that, which was through the Chamber of Commerce. And that was really interesting to interact with people because there's the profit and the nonprofit world.
Right.
And they want to interact together, but the nonprofit people are like, oh, like you guys don't actually make money? No, we don't actually make money. We generate a lot of it, but
Right.
it goes out to other things.
Yeah.
So then I did the mom thing. And I liked that, which was funny. We had a group called Lifted, Ladies in Faith Together, Idaho.
Right.
Yeah, and we put on like fundraisers, and we were busy doing stuff. And then we're like, oh, it's homeschooling. So the education hat is back on because people ask me, they're like, oh, you must be a teacher if you're homeschooling. It's like there is almost zero of my education that I use within
Interesting.
homeschooling, because most of classroom teaching was classroom management, right? I have a classroom of 3. It's multi-age, but that versus 30 is really, really different. And the flexibility that I have to really just roll with my kids has been awesome versus this is what you teach and you teach it on this day and this is how it goes. Even within religion, because I was teaching religion.
Yeah. I just, when people hear that word apprenticeship, immediately I think they think plumbers, electricians. I mean, these are trades that traditionally you needed to have an apprenticeship. Maybe it was a father teaching his son so he could hand the family business off down the road.
The old cobbler thing in medieval
right.
ages. It's like your dad was a cobbler and you'll be a cobbler and so will your children.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it has grown so much, and that's what we were looking forward to talking with Tim and with Maureen about this morning, was just all the different opportunities that are out there for kids now that they can start these apprenticeships so much earlier, that they can be on the job force so much earlier.
Or learn that, man, I do not want that career before they invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in college. You come out with this degree and you realize, oh, maybe I didn't want to be an engineer. Or, gosh, maybe I wanted to do civil instead of electrical or IT instead of... So because the risk coming out from college is a reality. I was listening in the news recently that there's a white-collar recession where some of those more technical positions, companies are downsizing as we're in a recession, because that's a real thing, no matter how you define it. And so people need to be flexible. I guess the one thing I learned having hopped careers was your flexibility and willing to learn something totally new. And having the leadership and the communication, those soft skills, is absolutely key.
So my passion being music, which led me to my passion of wanting to be in radio, maybe some people don't have that. I mean, if you had to narrow it down, what would your passion be? Would it be education? And all the different forms that it's taken?
It could be.
Yeah.
It could be. But it's more of an intimacy in education than it might even just be storytelling. But I really dig math. Like, I really dig learning.
Yeah.
And I want other people to love it too. So it's it might be that, more of just loving learning. Because right now we use a public high school to do our homeschooling. And the rigidity of high school has been a big learning curve for Serenity and for me. And there are moments when I step back and go, is this a love of learning?
Yeah.
Or is this just a bunch of hoop jumping? And I vacillate between the two often, particularly during the learning curve. And you're like, man, I hope this is worth it on the other side. But it's figuring out, how do we love learning? How do we explore stuff?
Because my son that lives out in Seattle, his passion is like charts and graphs and numbers and tedious things that make my skin crawl when he describes them to me on the phone. But that is his passion. And God bless him that there are people out
Yes,
there
my
willing
brother,
to do this.
He reads fine print for a living. And
Yeah.
I'm so grateful because when my father died and he had to read through wills and fine print for life insurance, and that was his gift.
Yeah.
And we were so glad. So if you're a fine print chart graph person, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, because you are needed in our world and we are grateful.
So find your passion, figure out what you enjoy doing. If you can find an apprenticeship, look for those. But
Explore. I encourage you to explore.
So parents, if you've got those teenagers right now and they really haven't found what twists their tail.
Right. And they may not.
And they
I
might
mean,
not.
I didn't find out what I really loved until I was like 30-ish.
Yeah.
I was pondering. It's like, I didn't get smart till about 42.
still
And if as a
waiting.
parent that makes you groan, I get it. I get it. But just knowing that there'll be opportunities and things that you would never. I read a stat somewhere that like a third of the jobs that our children will have haven't even been created yet.
Right.
They don't even exist.
Yeah.
So how do we prepare them for the unknown?
So let's not be pigeonholing our kids at 15 years old. This is what you're going to be doing the rest of
Right,
your life.
because there is a lot of that, which is tricky.
Yeah. All right, we're going to take a...
That's our pep talk for you.
Don't you feel so pumped up and ready to go? Yeah, empowered. Great. We're going to take a 60-second break. Be back with news, traffic, and weather next. Sultan Lake Radio's Fall Pledge Drive begins October 12th. Everyone who completes their pledge, either online or by mail, will go into a drawing for a week-long stay at a Tamarack Chalet in Dawn Lake for up to 12 people. Enjoy the warmth of this 4-bedroom, 4-bath home after a day skiing the slopes, or spend a week next summer lounging by the lake. 3 levels of living space with a wraparound deck, gas barbecue, and an outdoor hot tub. Look for your pledge envelope in our next newsletter or visit saltandlightradio.com for details.
Do for the unborn babies that which they cannot do for themselves. Pray a novena of rosaries for their protection. This multinational pro-life novena for unborn babies is 9 consecutive days, starting September 29th on the Feast of the Archangels until October 7th, the Feast of Our Lady of the Rosary. Please join your daily rosary prayers for these 9 days with the intention for the protection of unborn human persons.
Morning Light News Time 7:40, 56 degrees in Boise, 51 in Twin Falls. A new council member was recommended and appointed to the Twin Falls City Council during the September 12th council meeting. Mayor Ruth Pierce recommended Alexandra Covell to seat 3 after it was vacated by former city council member Sean Berriger, who served on the council for over 14 years. Over 20 qualified candidates applied for the seat, with 17 showing presentations for the bid.
Page 2. As the Lori Vallow Daybell trial continues, the current issue is whether or not the trial will be live streamed for the public, or even if recording material can be brought in. The Fremont County judge heard arguments on the issue and will provide a written opinion. The attorney for several press organizations stated that the public wants to follow the trial. Those opposed to the video and audio recording said it mocked the defendant and compromised her right to a fair trial.
So we watched a 3-episode series on Netflix called Sins of Our Mother.
How was that?
It
So that
is
tell people what
interesting.
that's about.
That is a Netflix series that was put together based on Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell and their strange religion. I mean, it goes pretty far back to kind of paint the picture of who we're dealing with this. It's odd. It is odd. So if you have some time this weekend and want to do that, because it's captivated the entire country. I mean, it's been on Dateline numerous times.
Right.
It's so...
Right. And it's always Idaho, it's known for the weird thing.
stuff.
Here we are.
Mm-hmm. So if you're interested in this Our Sins of Our Mother.
Wow.
So check
on
that out.
Netflix.
Yeah.
Okay.
Boise State football preparing for tomorrow's home opener, but months of preparation have gone into improving the fans' experience at Albertson Stadium. Some exciting new changes include the upgraded video board in the north end zone, a nice collection of food trucks, fireworks displays, even a public concert 3 hours before kickoff. Tomorrow's show features Emily and the Tiptones. Kickoff is set for 2 p.m. tomorrow afternoon as the Broncos host the UT Martin Skyhawks.
How about cushy seats? That would be lovely.
That would be.
If you're going to upgrade.
Yeah.
Think of us with tender tushes. Idahoans breathed a sigh of relief as a railroad workers' strike was averted. The strike would have cost the U.S. economy $2 billion a day and would have crippled the movement of goods in the U.S. Wages, bonuses, sick time availability, and a point attendance system used by the railroad companies was vastly improved. The federal government intervened in an unprecedented move to push negotiations along. Traffic, weather, and air quality are next.
Owned and operated by 2 former Bishop Kelly students, Bluebird Express Car Wash is proud to support Salt and Light Radio with their world-renowned custom equipment and free services such as towels, vacuums, air guns, and mat washers. Your car will shine like never before. 2 locations near Bishop Kelly on Overland Road or at Fairview and Cole, and coming soon to State Street near St. Mary's. For information on locations and unlimited memberships, the website is bluebirdexpress.com.
Good morning, light traffic. So it's particularly slow in Canyon County in Caldwell between the Franklin Road interchange and what looks like the overpass being built there at Ustick Road. Just a parking lot, but it is the westbound lane. So keep that in mind as you are making your way, because it might be interesting to look at. You might slow down and go, I wonder what all those cars are doing parked in the westbound lane. Again, just a tiny bit of slowing after Meridian Road and in and around Eagle, but really you're going to make your way without a problem this morning. Also, there's major construction, Orchard and Fairview. If you're thinking you're going to go all the way through on Fairview, no way, Jose. You're going to have to go around. And that is your morning light traffic.
Treasure Valley weekend weather, mostly sunny, high 75 to 80, overnight lows in the mid-50s. Magic Valley, you can expect partly cloudy skies over the weekend with highs in the mid-70s and overnight lows around 50 degrees. Yesterday's official high at the Boise Airport, 81, after a low of 61. Right now, 53 in Nampa at St. Paul's, 52 degrees at Corpus Christi in Fruitland, and Jerome reporting 49 degrees at St. Jerome's.
Idaho Department of Environmental Quality, real-time air monitoring, and I give you permission to breathe. Breathe deeply. Most of the state is in moderate air quality, which is still pretty good from where we have been. Everything really east of us and north, even Salmon finally has an opportunity to breathe. We're thankful to God for the storms that have kind of blown things along, which means it's probably smoking in Wyoming. But we're going to be right back with our Saint of the Day and then Priscilla's Porch.
This is Franciscan Media's Saint of the Day for September 16th. Today we celebrate Saint Cornelius. Persecution of the Church during the 3rd century reached such a peak that there was no pope for 14 months. Today's saint was elected following that interval. The greatest problem of Cornelius' 2-year term as pope had to do with the sacrament of penance. The question centered on the readmission of Christians who had renounced their faith during the time of persecution. Some of the proposed solutions were extreme, including one that came from a priest who had himself consecrated a rival bishop of Rome, the Church's first antipope. This priest denied that the Church had any power to welcome back those who had denied their faith, even those guilty of adultery. Cornelius, however, had the support of most of the Church in condemning such extremes. In 251, he held a synod in Rome and ordered that lapsed Catholics could be restored to the Church with what he called the usual medicines of repentance. Persecutions resumed the following year, and Cornelius was arrested and deported. Though he was a candidate for martyrdom, he more likely died in 253 as a result of the hardships of his exile and imprisonment than by beheading. There's more about the saints along with inspiration and Catholic resources at our website, saintoftheday.org. From Franciscan Media, this has been Saint of the Day.
Priscilla's Porch is a new weekly segment on Morning Light aimed at Catholic women and the feminine genius that was given to them by God. Grab a rocking chair and a cup of tea as we share stories, wisdom, and faith. And now, the hostess with heaps of hospitality, Busy Shore.
7:47, 13 minutes away from 8 o'clock as we wrap up this Faithful Friday edition of Morning Light with Priscilla's Porch. Busy Shore joining us now in the St. Gabriel studio talking about triumph.
Yes. So if you haven't heard, we just had the Idaho Catholic Women's Conference last Saturday.
I almost wore my shirt this morning.
Yeah.
Almost.
So yes, Hope was our MC. We had a great day.
It was beautiful. God blessed it abundantly.
It was so good. And the theme of that conference was triumphant in joy and sorrow. And a couple weeks ago, we talked a little bit about those themes, but I really want to sort of dive into it, especially because we have so many people that weren't able to make it. But also, it's just a really good wrap up. So whether you, if you were there, then hopefully this can sort of settle in some of the things and the thoughts from that week or from that event. So first, as usual, put on our Dominican hat. We're going to define our terms. What is triumph? It's this word. We kind of think we know what it means, but let's make sure. So Merriam-Webster defines it as a victory or conquest by, or as if by, military force, or a notable success. For instance, the party was a triumph, or in this case, the conference was a triumph. Okay, or the joy or exaltation of a victory or success. So that's kind of the feeling. And so the adjectives that would go with this is, the first one, victory or conquest, be victorious or conquering, or something that it was notably successful, the rejoicing or celebrating around this thing that happened. Okay, so that's kind of just where we all know where we're talking about. But what are the prerequisites for a triumph? Like if you're going to have a triumph, what has to happen? So you have to have a goal. It has to be a thing, which could be, we're going to win the battle. We are going to, drive away the invaders. We are going to conquer this territory. We're going to throw a party and it's all going to go really well and everyone's going to have a great time. Whatever it is. So you have to have a vision of what success looks like. Okay. There has to be hard work and effort. Okay. So your triumph could be, I'm going to climb to the top of Table Rock. That's your goal. It takes work to get up there. Right. But, watching like a Netflix series doesn't necessarily involve triumph because you're just sitting on the couch pushing play.
I binged on 5 seasons in 2 days.
That's not actually a triumph. Sorry, Hope. I feel sorry for you back. So, and then I would posit that triumph involves an adversary, which can be abstract or metaphorical. It doesn't necessarily mean that there has to be a literal enemy that you're fighting on the plains of battle, but it could be the forces of nature. It could, maybe there's, a huge natural disaster and you are triumphant in surviving or, rescuing people or, whatever. Or you made it through the pass without a car accident. Good job. Right. Or it could be like general pressures, of life that are sort of expected on a road, like in planning a conference. There's all of these things that are natural parts of planning a conference, but that are in some ways.
And that the evil one really, really does not want it to succeed.
Yes. And so sometimes you could say, well, the actual enemy is bringing in these other little things that individually could be expected, but that still are obstacles that we need to overcome. And there's just more of them than you would expect because that's one of the things he does. So, or even happenstance, really like bad luck stuff can create that sort of adversarial experience. There has to be potential for failure. Okay. If you know you're going to succeed, like, are you going to succeed in watching a Netflix show? There's not really potential for failure there. So that's another reason you can't really
For the record, I do not have Netflix.
Neither do I. I do have some other streaming things, though, so I don't know how much that counts. I don't know if I get a lot of credit for that one. So potential for failure, perseverance in the face of all of these things. Obviously, you have to keep going. You can't just give up. And then finally, achievement. So these are all of the things we need to have triumph. A goal, there has to be hard work and effort, some sort of adversarial things to overcome in the midst of it, potential for failure, perseverance, and then finally you achieve the thing. So, but our theme for the conference was triumphant in joy and sorrow. So I wanted to unpack, why do we need triumph in both of these areas? And you can look at joy and sorrow can kind of cover like all of life. There's this half and there's that half. It's the two sides of the moon, the bright side and the dark side. So, but there's kind of pitfalls in both of these areas. So, okay, so what do you mean? What are their dangers in joy? It's like, what? Well, so for this little bit, we're going to use joy as kind of a stand-in for the good times. Like, you can have a whole discussion about how joy is different than happiness, and happiness is both temporal, it's triggered by other things. Like, you can be happy when you eat an ice cream cone, but ice cream doesn't actually bring you joy. Joy is longer lasting, comes all of this stuff. For the purposes of today, we're going to use the word joy to cover like things are good in what all manners in which you can think about that. Okay. So what are the dangers and why we might need to be triumphant in the midst of joy? So one of the pitfalls is distraction, that we can get really distracted by these things that bring us, we would say they bring us joy. And some of these things can be like really, really good, like playing with my kids. Like that's a really great thing. That's awesome. But even with those good things, it is easy to lose track of where our hearts need to be. Okay. We combat distraction with the virtue of diligence. Okay. We are diligent to keep an eye on what our hearts are doing and are we doing the Lord's work. So another one is laziness, which is kind of in the same with distraction, but it's slightly different. So it's like resting on your laurels. Oh man.
Yeah, sloth.
And some of it's, I worked really hard years ago and now life is good. So it's fine. Laziness is the devil's doorstep is the old phrase. So we combat laziness with prudence, of not just being diligent, but having the wisdom and the prudence to look at our lives, to look at what God calls us to, and what do I need to be doing now? I know I worked hard in the past, but we're talking about now. Another is pride, which is kind of very similar. I've earned this. You haven't earned anything, guys. We talked about this when we talked about poverty. You worked hard, and that's great. Good job. Pat on the back. But God provides us with everything we need. So we combat the pride with humility and also generosity. If you have much, much will be asked of you. So give it freely. So dangers of sorrow, because we're moving right along. Discouragement. That's a really, really big problem, a big pitfall in sorrow. And it's really common. I say it's a problem. That doesn't mean that if you are discouraged that there's like anything wrong with you. I'm sorry that you're having sorrow. We combat discouragement with fortitude. We'll see it through, even when we're discouraged. Okay, don't stop. We can feel abandoned, and we can combat that with a virtue of faith, to know that God is always there for us and that he has not abandoned us even when we feel like it. Feelings are not reality. Bitterness, sorrow, especially prolonged sorrow, can create a root of bitterness. And we combat that with surrender, with hope, with generosity and charity. You don't feel like giving stuff away to help other people because your life is bad. Guess what? Do it anyway. And the act of being generous, of being charitable to others, will help to combat your own bitterness and help you to avoid that. And then just feeling harassed or thwarted or cheated. It's very similar to bitterness, but there is a slight difference there. That we combat with justice, with really pursue justice in your own heart. And not just justice. It's not like, I deserve this, give me my just desserts. But true justice is recognizing the whole grand scale of things. How do I fit in the whole picture? What is actually due to me? But more importantly, what is due to everyone else around me? What do they need and deserve? And what does God deserve from me? So those are the sort of pitfalls of why we need to triumph in both of these areas. But it's also important, what are we seeking triumph over? That's a really important thing. Like we've talked about, there has to be a victory, there has to be a goal. Like, what is the goal for us as Christians, as Catholics? What do we need triumph over? We are not looking for triumph over pain or sadness or poverty or
suffering.
Illness. Yeah, we are not seeking triumph over people or circumstances. We are not seeking military triumph or political, triumph over political entities. We're not even seeking triumph over other beliefs. And we're not even really seeking triumph over the devil. Because in many ways, he's actually kind of irrelevant. Like, what? And I'm not saying that, he's real. He's annoying. Mm-hmm. He can absolutely impact your life.
That fight has been fought, and we know that it's won.
Exactly. Yeah. Because beating him is not the goal. It's a side effect, right? It's a free add-on. It's like those TV infomercials. But wait, there's more. You also get free victory over hell. Okay, yay. What we seek triumph over is sin and the death, the eternal deaths of our souls. That's what we seek triumph over. So it's triumph over ourselves, or our fallen human nature. That's our triumph. So Satan's goal is just to keep us out of heaven. Right? To prove that he has control, and he kind of does that by stealing us from God. It's like, if these people don't go to heaven, then that proves that I have some control, right? Mm-hmm. But he doesn't care about us individually. He's thinking about the numbers. Bottom lines are terrible. He wants to keep us from God, and he'll use everything, big things, little things, weird things, to keep us away. But he doesn't really understand God's purpose or really how the human heart works. our goal of triumph, our moment of triumph comes when we enter the gates of heaven. And every step that we make towards heaven is an arrow fired against the gates of hell. That's all it takes. You don't have to go assault those directly. When we enter the gates of heaven, we cast down the gates of hell. That's how that works. There doesn't have to be direct assault. That's not necessary. The one causes the other. So how do we do that? First commandment, the greatest commandment of all. Love the Lord your God. Yep. And the second, so love your neighbor. Mm-hmm. How do we love our neighbor? Pursue the virtues. You look up all of this. So if you're like, well, how do I love my neighbor? It doesn't necessarily mean go give them a hug. That might be what your neighbor needs. And in that case, please go do it. But that's what the virtues are about. The virtues are breaking down the steps and the little pieces in how we love our neighbor. And there's always more to do in those areas. You can always go deeper in all of those things. So the last thought I want to leave you all with is, remember, we know how this ends. Okay? The triumph is already won. It is for us. We were made for it, but it's not ours. We didn't create the triumph or earn it, which also means we can't screw it up.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Busy.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Oh,
we are
boy.
triumphant.
That wraps up Faithful Friday. Go to saltandlightradio.com later today. Click the Morning Light page and hit podcast if you missed any of today's segments or previous programs.
Follow us on YouTube. We are on live at this moment. Visit Salt and Light Radio's YouTube page to see how pointy my nose really is. Questions, comments, or prayer intentions, please send us an email, morninglight@saltandlightradio.com. We'd like to thank our guests today, Mark Rennick and Busy Shore.
On Monday, Melissa Hemphill from Silent No More. Financial Fitness provided by Tim Zadzora. And Donna Gordon, principal of St. Mark's School, will be here to talk about their remodeling project.
So join us 7 a.m. for a marvelous Monday edition of Morning Light. St. Maximilian Kolbe,
Pray for us. St. Cornelius.
Pray for us. St. Gabriel the Archangel.
Pray for us. Have a blessed weekend, everybody.
Take a deep breath while you can.
Salt and Light Radio, AM